we want to turn to another critically important issue, and that is the ongoing and intensifying, it seems, crackdown on free speech, at least where it concerns people speaking out in solidarity with the Palestinian people on campuses here across the United States. And we are very, very honored to be joined here on the show by Dylan Saba, who's a staff attorney at Palestine Legal. Dylan, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Eugene. Thank you, Rania. Thanks for having us on.
Well, it's really an honor to have you here. I mean, this is a critical issue, obviously. I think people have probably seen some that there is, crackdowns on students on campus, but maybe to give us a 20,000-foot view of where we are here. I mean, it seems to me that there's been an intensification as well as we've come into the new administration of attacks on students by various institutions.
Yeah, thank you, Eugene. So over the past 15 months, really, and before that as well, we've seen a really massive outgrowth of the student movement with respect to solidarity for Palestine. So a tremendous amount of organizing on campuses across the country, and really a tremendous amount of new organizing since the start of Israel's genocidal onslaught on the Gaza Strip that began in October of 2023. And so really what began as really focused demands on campuses around ending their university's complicity with the Zionist regime and Israel's genocide has turned into a counter-repression movement, right? So instead of honoring these very pretty basic and moral demands that the student movement was putting to their institutions, these institutions instead engaged in really repressive crackdowns, including the use of law enforcement and the overuse of student disciplinary processes to really raise the costs of speaking out for Palestine, right? So this is part of a long-standing issue about how Palestine and pro-Palestine speech is treated differently in the United States, and we know why that is, right? That's because advocating for Palestinian liberation is a threat to the U.S. imperial project, right? So that is the reason why Palestinians are targeted and people in solidarity with Palestinians are targeted, because the message of dissent that they're expressing poses a threat to U.S. Hegemonic power and imperialist interests. And so we've seen, especially in the spring, we saw the massive, extremely powerful student encampment movements, where students across the country said, we're gonna occupy space on our campuses and really make sure our voices are heard. And those voices were heard. They made it all the way to Gaza and inspired people there on the ground. And so now what do we see? We see a tremendous amount of fear in the Zionist lobby, right? So what are they scared of? They're scared of people hearing this message, the message for Palestinian liberation, and they're scared that across the country, the young people who represent the future of the American public opinion are rejecting Zionism and expressing their support for Palestinian liberation. And given Israel's position as an appendage of American empire, losing the support of U.S. public opinion is a really it's a core threat to the long-term viability of the Zionist project. And so they have lobbied the Trump administration and the Biden administration before Trump to really crack down on student organizing. And so that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the start and really the continuation of this repressive movement to try and bring consequences on students for voicing these kinds of critiques. And what we've seen so far from the student movement is resilience, right? Students willing to take the risk of certain consequences, willing to do what it takes to protect each other in the face of this repression, because they know that their message of Palestinian liberation is more important now than it's ever been.
So with this particular crackdown, it's one of potentially many to come. Is there a possibility to challenge it, one? And two, what else do you all expect this administration to be doing to come after? I guess it's going to be students first and foremost.
Yeah. So let me speak a little more concretely and specifically about what the Trump administration is doing here. So in the first Trump administration, the first term in 2019, they passed an executive order that directs the Department of Education to consider this definition that you may have heard about called the IHRA definition. This is a really problematic way of conceptualizing anti-Semitism that basically just takes any and all, for the most part, any and all criticism of the state of Israel and prohibits it and calls it anti-Semitic, right? So in Trump 1, they directed the Department of Education, okay, consider this definition when you are evaluating anti-Semitism on campus. And that was a major concern, and it's a major threat on free expression, right? If you have a Palestinian student who is prohibited from talking about their experience and the experience of their family and their political position around that, that is a grave violation of free expression. So now Trump has come in and he's built on that executive order. He's passed another executive order. And what this executive order does is it asks that universities participate in and aid the federal government in surveilling their own students, right? And it directs elements of the federal government to come up with ways, with different tools to silence Palestine advocates on campus. So this means two things. It means one, that they are continuing their crackdown, right? And that threats to students are real. This is particularly the case for non-citizen students, right? So they have threatened along the campaign that they're going to use deportation as a tool of political suppression, and they're going to continue to do that. I will note, though, this is not new. This is not new to Trump. And we have seen a long history, actually, of particularly anti-Palestinian racism through the U.S. immigration system. That history goes back all the way to the 70s, including like the first introduction of terrorism into the U.S. like at the level of the U.S. Congress, was about using the federal immigration system to break the bonds of solidarity between Palestinian organizers on the ground in Palestine and the United States. But so they are trying to continue that practice of leveraging those threats. Now they are constrained by the First Amendment, right? So students, particularly on public university campuses, have free speech protections, right? It doesn't mean that the Trump administration will not try to violate those protections. But in terms of what students can do, students can remain firm in their convictions, and they can come to organizations like my own if they feel like their rights are being infringed on, and there will be challenges that are mounted, right? And it may not come right away. But those challenges will come. And my message to students here, right, is to continue to be brave and continue to be strong and continue to speak out. The Trump administration's plan and the Zionist organizations and the Israel lobby's plan works if they can intimidate everyone into silence. Now, that doesn't mean don't be smart, right? If you are at heightened risk because of your citizenship status or other factors, you want to consult and get specific legal advice, right? Especially if you're a non-citizen, but certainly before leaving the country, you want to talk to an immigration attorney. But for everyone more broadly, right? This issue is of vital and critical importance, and we cannot allow the fear tactics of the Trump administration to silence us. I'll remind everyone that Palestinians on the ground have remained steadfast through 15 months of genocide. And we don't pretend like there won't be risks for mobilizing around Palestine in the United States. But the situation demands that we be brave, that we protect each other, and that we advance this cause forward.
No, I think that's such a great point, and I'm glad you put it in that context, because it really does feel like this is an important continuation of what we have seen over the past 15 months in this I think unprecedented explosion of support for people showing solidarity with Palestine and every nook and cranny of the country and every possible background. I mean, really something that I think was very notable, not just here but around the world, that this is an opportunity to also as some people say, try to turn an attack into a victory, and to use this as just another opportunity to assert the humanity of Palestinian people and the right of people here in this country to demand change to the policies that our own government is enacting in our name.
Absolutely. The other piece of this that I want to add here is this is being framed, right, as a way to protect Jewish students. That is, it's called like the Combating Anti-Semitism EO, and I just need to point out how absolutely ridiculous it is. Saying that Israel is the one country that you are not allowed to criticize, while Israel is committing a genocide in full view of the entire world, that is not going to reduce anti-Semitism, right? Saying that the only identity the Trump administration says we want to attack all DEI, right? No identity is protected, except the only identity they want to protect is if you support genocide. right? That is not a way to protect Jewish students. It's not a way to protect Jewish students because it stifles criticism, like rightful criticism of the Jewish state, and it also is a direct attack on the identity of anti-Zionist Jews, for whom that is an essential part of their own Judaism. So we have to reject this. We have to reject this framing. We have to uplift the Palestinian voices for liberation, and the voices who are in solidarity with Palestine, and also anti-Zionist Jews who too need to be able to be speaking out for Palestinian liberation.
And I'm just curious. I mean, you must be Palestine Legal must be just overwhelmed with requests for help. But when we look at not just the U.S., and I know you all don't necessarily work in other countries, but there does seem to be a pattern here across the West at the moment, especially in the aftermath of 15 months of live stream genocide that has left many people feeling very traumatized and very disgusted and angry with Western for support for this genocidal state. You see this repression taking place in the UK, for example, this attack on journalists and activists and raiding their homes and confiscating their devices. You see this, Ali Abunimah was just arrested and detained for days in Switzerland before being deported on ridiculous charges. You see what's happening. I mean, it hasn't quite gone that far in the US yet, perhaps because we have the First Amendment. But that said, how serious is this backlash against this legal backlash, the using the law in these Western countries, basically by Zionists to try to suppress what, is more difficult than before because public opinion is turning against them? How serious is this backlash?
It's incredibly serious, right? And I don't think we should beat around the bush. What we are seeing is a new McCarthyism, right? We have not seen this level of repression in the United States and across the West since the era of the Cold War, and maybe even before that, right? So we need to be honest about what we're facing and the risks, right? The risk that this poses for everyday organizers, activists, people who are willing to speak out. But we also need to recognize that it's not working, right? We also need to recognize that the more repression the state brings down on movements, the more radicalized people become. I see it all the time in my advising students on campuses, right? A lot of times, what is the most inspiring to them is how they see their institutions treat their peers, right? What starts as, hey, maybe we should think about how much our institution is funding genocide. That turns into, oh my God, all of a sudden now my peers are being targeted by the institution and being told that they can't speak out. Maybe that message has some vital, critical importance, right? And maybe we need to think differently about our tactics, right? And we are seeing that in the United States, and we're seeing it elsewhere. In Germany, it's been insane, right? The crackdowns have been insane, but each time there's a headline that says, oh, now they're considering banning the Arabic language at a protest, that mobilizes 10 more people, right? And what I love about this movement is people's commitment to creativity and commitment to resilience. It does not mean there won't be setbacks. It does not mean that there won't be times where we need to reevaluate our strategies in the face of state and institutional repression. But the movement will continue. I have so much unbridled, tremendous faith in the creativity and the resilience of the student movement in particular, and I'm excited to see where things go, because I know that Trump's repression will not work, and the movement will continue.
Dylan, quickly before we let you go here, if folks want to learn more about Palestine Legal, the work you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, so you can find us online, PalestineLegal.org, and do not hesitate to reach out if you want particular legal advice around your situation. And to the extent that we're not able to provide that advice to you, we will do our best to connect you with our partners. But absolutely, follow us on social medias and use our intake form on the website and keep organizing.
Right on. Dylan Saba, staff attorney with Palestine Legal. Thank you so much for your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you both.